A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there was a prophecy of a chosen one who would destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force. A young woman named Shmi would give birth to a miracle, a son with no father. The boy was named Anakin Skywalker. Years later, a Jedi Master named Qui-Gon Jinn would find the boy as a slave on Tatooine. Sensing the boy's high concentration of Force sensitivity, Jinn freed the boy and took him to the Jedi Temple, where he was trained under Obi-Wan Kenobi. Anakin's skills quickly progressed as a Jedi, especially during the Clone Wars. Many Jedi suspected that he was indeed the prophesied Chosen One. While Anakin's powers and skills were increasing during the war, his inherent struggles with the dark side tore him apart, piece by piece. The Battle of Jabim, the skirmish of Yavin 4, the departure of Ahsoka Tano, the murder of Count Dooku, and the visions of his dying wife, all broke Anakin down to his dark core. The young Jedi allowed his feelings of anger, hate, and fear of loss to enslave his very essence. By the Clone Wars' end, he joined the Sith and had a hand in destroying all known Jedi through Order 66. He spearheaded the attack against the Jedi Temple, and he would be known as one of the greatest Jedi killers of all time. Gone was Anakin Skywalker, consumed by Darth Vader. There were other notable Jedi besides the Chosen One during the Clone Wars. No longer a time of peace in the Galactic Republic, a new kind of Jedi, much like Anakin Skywalker, was necessary. The values of lecture and nurture were set aside in the favor of hardiness and determination. Mace Windu was one of these Jedi Masters. Mace was one of the first Jedi to take a position as a general in the Clone Wars. He was most famous for his mind for battle, politics, and tactics. He was noted among the very best of the Order, an expert swordsman and an excellent practitioner of the Force, second only to Grandmaster Yoda. His talents derived from his native world of Harun Kal, where all Karunai could touch the Force, a necessity to survive the unforgiving jungles of the planet. During the Clone Wars, the Jedi Master's talents were not wasted. Windu served as both a strategist and frontline soldier in numerous conflicts. Although Mace achieved victories on battlefields such as Dantooine and Ryloth, he was also met with hardship, notably on his homeworld. Windu's ideals were tested time and again, wary of the darkness that surrounded the Clone Wars, determined to protect the principles of the Jedi Order. As the Clone Wars came to a close, Mace stepped up his efforts to uncover the Lord of the Sith. Mace was only steps behind the Dark Lord's true identity. When Anakin Skywalker revealed that the Sith Lord was Chancellor Palpatine, Windu made his move without a question. Unfortunately for Windu, he did not decipher Anakin's role in the Dark Lord's schemes. Mace Windu was killed by Darth Sidious after Anakin Skywalker cut his hand off. Like most of my videos, I'll be examining these characters in their primes. Fortunately for us, both characters experienced their primes during the same time period. For Anakin Skywalker, this is a specific examination of his abilities as a Jedi Knight. Therefore, this will be an examination of his character during the events of Revenge of the Sith, just before his turn to the dark side. For Mace Windu, this will be during the same time period. At the age of 23, Anakin was at the pinnacle of his physical prime as a human male. He was shaped with an athletic build, strong, fast, and agile. He was already an extremely capable fighter before the Clone Wars, but the war itself crafted him into one of the most physically impressive Jedi of his time. At the age of 53, Mace was clearly outside his natural prime. For a Jedi Master, such as himself, this was hardly ever an issue. Windu kept himself in top shape. He was not only a general, but a frontline soldier, taking on and defeating the best the galaxy had to offer. Anakin Skywalker always had extraordinary reflexes. As a child, he was the only human to successfully pod race, not only surviving, but winning. These attributes only increased once he was trained as a Jedi. On 3 occasions, Skywalker was able to navigate through hyperspace by way of his reflex alone. Even as a young Padawan learner, Anakin's physical talents were a sight to behold. Obi-Wan Kenobi had likened Anakin's speed to those of Jedi Masters when Anakin was only a teenager. Anakin's gift with Force-augmented speed extended to his time during the war, dodging cannon fire without an issue, and contending with Count Dooku, a former Jedi Master, when he was only a Padawan himself. Much like Anakin, Mace used the Force to augment his physical attributes, putting more power behind his punches, or more stride in his running step. Mace could evade blaster fire with his sheer speed, or outright evade point-blank blaster fire with a reflexive sidestep. Windu's greatest example of his reflex and dexterity was against his clan brother Car Vaster. Though Vaster was much younger, much faster, much more able, Mace landed several punches on him in a blink of an eye. Mace's contention with Car Vaster was not a display of extraordinary strength or physical might, but a practiced use of his body. Unlike Vaster, who fought with ferocity, using teeth and claws in a berserker's assault, Mace targeted collarbones, thighs, and windpipes. In short, Mace was using his body more efficiently. As Windu would say, the ultimate answer to power was skill. Anakin Skywalker was very similar to Car Vaster in this area of strength and power. He was one of the very few Jedi to survive the grueling Battle of Jabin. He broke the defenses of several opponents through his sheer might, including Asajj Ventress, Barriss Offee, and Count Dooku. Yes, none of these opponents were known for their brawn, but Anakin has tainted physical assault from the bounty hunter Dirge, and when facing Ventress, he broke the stone from under her. Not to mention, he willed himself to destroy the power source of a Separatist factory with his bare metal hand. Anakin's vigor would become a staple for him throughout the Clone Wars, relying on his strength just as much as his constitution. Mace Windu did not lack for his strength either. Through his Force augmentation, he was able to dent and break droid Alloy during the Battle of Dantooine. He did not do this with his lightsaber, but with his bare, squishy human hands. His endurance and constitution were off the charts as well. During the events of his solo novel Shatterpoint, he endured weeks of punishment in the jungles of his homeworld. Mace ran on little to no sleep. He suffered through a shot through his gut, a gaping wound on his neck, and several wounds across his chest, wrist, and knees. And though his injuries did not help when he fought Depa Billaba, he still powered through. He still survived. Anakin Skywalker and Mace Windu were perhaps the most physically tenacious Jedi of their order. Their speed and dexterity were relatively tantamount. Their strength and constitution were essentially on par. The key difference here would be their age and their use of Force augmentation. Clearly, Anakin has the advantage here, able to fall back on his youth when his Force reserves were depleted. Mace, on the other hand, would likely fall to fatigue before Anakin in an extended fight. But much like his fight with Vaster, Mace has displayed that his martial skill can keep him in a fight with a much younger adversary. I would give Anakin a slight edge for his sheer tenacity, but I would give Mace a slight edge for his skill. For this, I would say there is no definitive edge to either fighter with regards to their physical abilities. Anakin Skywalker was undeniably the most powerful Force-sensitive known to the galaxy and the lore of Star Wars. Let me make myself clear. He was the most powerful Force sensitive, not the most skillful Force wielder. Mace Windu was also a gifted Force sensitive, an attribute shared among all the people of his planet. Even as a young Jedi, Mace was far more talented than his peers. By his own estimation, his Force sense was sometimes as keen, if not more, than Jedi Knights and Jedi Masters. While Anakin was not the most skilled Force user, his strength in the Force was astounding, capable of powerful Force throws, waves, and repulses. At his mightiest, he can manipulate a dreadnought with his grip, and bring down a large dome with a Force scream. He has even broken through the Force wall of Count Dooku. While he could not outright ragdoll someone like Yoda or Mace Windu, he has tossed around the likes of Asajj Ventress and Barriss Offee with ease. On the subject of Force grips, Anakin was naturally talented with a Force choke ability. Force choke was not usually attributed to the Jedi, being that it was an extremely aggressive power, but Anakin used it with leisure throughout the Clone Wars. Likewise, Mace used Force abilities that were usually attributed to the dark side. The most interesting thing about Windu, though it is never explicitly stated in any text, is that he is essentially a Dark Jedi, or at the very least, a Grey Jedi. Windu never fell to the dark side for any extended period of time. He utilized abilities like Force Crush, an aggressive ability, yet never gave in to the dark side. He could even use the dark side as a conduit, amplifying his Force augmentation and Force senses when properly motivated. Yet, he still never fell to the dark side. This is one of the key differences between Anakin and Mace. They both had extraordinary, inherent power with the Force, and they both flirted with the dark side, but their control over their darkness was completely different. Anakin was capable of some extraordinary feats, but they often came with a lack of control. Sure, he could bring down a cathedral dome with a mere Force scream, but that power could not be called upon at will. There was no focus to it, no forethought. Mace, on the other hand, had an extraordinary control over the Force. The best case for this is his use of Shatterpoint. Although Windu's use of Shatterpoint is rather inconsistent, for instance, it didn't seem to come up, nor did it help, in several of his battles throughout the Clone Wars, I still believe it directly informs his use of the Force. Shatterpoints were all about looking for weaknesses, looking for cracks. Windu does not try to blow a hole through a fortress. Instead, he finds the weakest brick to hit, concentrating on that one point to bring the whole fortress down. Don't get me wrong, Anakin was not completely out of touch with the general nuances of the Force. Anakin has showcased a talent for beast control and empathy. His farsight was extraordinary, perfectly attuned to his surroundings. And while I do believe Anakin's strength came from his blunt use of the Force, he wasn't entirely without skill. He redirected a small sandstorm against Dooku and used debris to fight against Dirge. But subtlety was not Anakin's typical mode of operation. By that same token, I am not suggesting that Mace was merely a Jedi of nuance. Of his Jedi abilities, he was able to perform powerful Force waves and repulses. During his battles on Dantooine and Coruscant, he is showcased blasting dozens of battle droids away. Even though he never replicated this power in the middle of a duel, these achievements do speak to his overall power as a Force wielder. Perhaps Anakin's largest weakness was his Force wall. Not surprising when you consider someone like Anakin. Typically with any talented athlete, we see this. Someone who is a natural talent on offense, but doesn't put in the work on defense. When it came to the Force, Anakin was more focused on how it could bolster his physical attributes, how it could highlight the swing of his lightsaber, not how it could help him defend against attack. Windu was not renowned for his Force wall either. He too had his Force wall broken, though against some notable Force users like Car Vaster and Darth Sidious. Much like Anakin, his focus was on his offensive efforts. His abilities were often diverted to ways to puncture his opponent's defense, rather than managing his own. As stated before, both Anakin and Mace were extremely powerful Force sensitives. While Anakin had a much higher midichlorian count, giving him a much higher threshold for his potential, he lacked a practiced control over that power. This did not affect him negatively in most cases, but against a Jedi Master of Mace Windu's caliber, it would be an issue. Windu's entire style was based around a skillful use of the Force. 50 plus years of measured success. I do not attribute this skill solely to Shatterpoint, but more to his own practice expertise. Both Anakin and Mace were very astute when it came to their Force senses. Anakin with his Farsight, Mace with his Shatterpoint. But I favor Windu's more calculated use of his abilities over Anakin's more intuitive flow of raw power. If the battle between these two came down to blows of the Force, I find it very unlikely for either of them to ragdoll the other, even with their lacking Force defenses. Instead, I believe a battle of the Force would be decided by a crack, a chink in the armor, and that crevice would be found by the Jedi Master. Mace Windu gets the slight edge for his Force abilities. Anakin Skywalker is noted as one of the best lightsaber duelists of the Clone Wars. Nick Gillard, the stunt coordinator of the prequel trilogy, says it best.
Hayden in this film has moved up to a level 9. He's gone past Obi. Now the difference between a level 8 and a level 9 really is the dark side. You have to go through each level in order to attain the next level, and if you do it too quick, you're going to get in trouble.
Count Dooku, possibly the best duelist of the time, regarded Anakin as the greatest Gemso specialist he had ever seen. Mace Windu regarded Anakin as a natural fighter. There was really no way around it. Anakin really was an innate warrior. He was at home at battle, at home under the clash of a lightsaber. Mace Windu was also regarded as one of the most formidable lightsaber duelists of the entire Jedi Order, period. Again, Nick Gillard, along with Sam Jackson, say it best.
We've not seen Mace fight yet, and we know that he's second only to Yoda.
Since I'm supposedly the second baddest person in the universe, I dispense people pretty quickly.
And it's really quite true. Mace was one of the most lethal Jedi of the Order, taking no issue with ending a conflict through aggressive negotiation. Anakin Skywalker was almost an exclusive user of the fifth form of lightsaber combat. There were two variants of the form, Xian and Gemso. At first, Anakin became proficient with Xian, which was geared to blaster deflection. Unlike the third form, which taught its user to bat away attacks harmlessly, Form 5 made sure to bring the fight back to its opponent, redirecting the blaster fire back at the caster. The form will become quite useful for Anakin during his early Jedi career, as most of his adversaries were blaster-wielding. It was not until his fight with Dooku in Episode 2 that Anakin would reassess his use of the form. Throughout the Clone Wars, Anakin displayed the principles of Gemso. It was similar in philosophy to Xian, bringing the fight back to one's foe. But instead of it being geared to blaster fire, it was geared to combating a lightsaber. Anakin's natural ability with the form allowed him to go from simply intermediate to masterful in the span of 3 years. Of course, Anakin supplemented his form with other styles, notably the exhaustive and overwhelming assaults of Form 4, Ataru. He also made use of Jar Kai, the discipline of dual blade fencing, but the way of the Krayt Dragon was largely his focus. Mace Windu was proficient in all known lightsaber forms of the time. Eventually, he and Sora Bulk, another Jedi Master, created Vaapad, which to them completed the menacing and untamed Juyo form. As a prerequisite, all practitioners of Vaapad had to have some proficiency in the other forms before trying to tackle its exhausting moveset. For the Jedi, Juyo was the most dangerous form to practice as it involved getting very close to the dark side. Part of the practitioner had to enjoy the fight. The Jedi banned Form 7 until Mace picked it up again and perfected it, turning the raw emotion it required and transforming it into a ferocious form used for the light. Windu, along with Sora Bulk, utilized Vaapad by making themselves a conduit of darkness, They use their inner darkness to energize their strikes, but never letting the darkness overtake them. When used properly, the form was devastating against a single opponent. The moveset was unpredictable and lightning fast, but there was a trade-off. Vaapad was a dedicated offensive form. It was devastating in its moveset, but it left the user open to counterattacks. Anyone on the defensive end of Vaapad could utilize saber counters or force abilities to penetrate its one-sided offense. Ultimately, for a Jedi, even Vaapad was extremely dangerous. Mace Windu scolded Quinlan Vos for using the form during a sparring session, as Vos was already too close to the dark side. Anakin was also denied being taught the form by Sin Dralig for the same reasons. Even Obi-Wan Kenobi was dissuaded by Qui-Gon Jinn to use the form. It was Windu's mastery of Vaapad which enabled him to go toe-to-toe with Darth Sidious at all. A feat that was achieved through circumstance, yes, but one that deserves credit. Of course, Vaapad was not Windu's only tool in a lightsaber duel. He could fall back on any other form as well, but there is no text that explains which forms they may be. Judging by his encounters during the Clone Wars, I would say his specializations were with Sarisu, Shien, and Ataru. I am under the impression that anyone who survived the Battle of Geonosis was at least highly proficient with Sarisu and/or Shien. The rapid-fire, omnidirectional laser fire would have been too much for a novice or even an intermediate user of those forms. I attribute Ataru to him as well because he was able to use his entire body as a weapon, lightsaber, foot, or fist, all alike, and many of his comic book appearances depict him employing elaborate acrobatics. Anakin Skywalker and Mace Windu, both the best lightsaber duelists of their time. To me, there is no question that they were on par, in the same tier in terms of their skill with a lightsaber. Anakin as the de facto master of Jim So, Mace Windu as the Jedi's culmination of Form 7. Anakin has a form advantage by way of his Jim So counterattacks, which would work perfectly against Vaapad, which was dedicated to offense. But Vaapad could fuel Mace. A fight with someone like Anakin would feed the power of Vaapad, not by way of a superconducting loop of the dark side, which was only achieved once, but Windu's own internal joy of a good fight. Neither duelist completely outstrips the other. Their accolades were tantamount. Their fighting abilities were comparable. Anakin Skywalker is often oversimplified in his approach to combat. Yes, he was ferocious. Yes, he could have tunnel vision. And yes, he could sometimes be rough around the edges. But the kid has some serious skill. For example, many attribute Anakin's win over Dooku to his extraordinary strength. Yet, when you review the fight, Anakin defeated Dooku through superior finesse by outfencing the best fencer of the time. On the other hand, we have Mace and Sidious, which I won't go into detail here. I have a whole video dedicated to that specific matchup. But Mace Windu was legitimately contending with the greatest Sith Lord there ever was. There is significance to that achievement, no matter what circumstance surrounds the fight. The issue here might be consistency. When Anakin was in the zone, he was almost unstoppable, but his largest enemy was himself, and he got in his own way more times than not.
Jedis are always supposed to be very much in control of their emotions, and Anakin maybe loses control a little bit and some of the darkness emerges.
Mace had far more self-restraint, as highlighted in his abilities to use Vaapad without actually succumbing to the dark side. And that just might be the deciding factor in a lightsaber duel against Anakin Skywalker. They both had the thrill of battle in their gut, the ability to use it, to act on it with skill and tenacity. But one of them had a better command over that power. Mace Windu gets the very slight edge for his dueling abilities. The fight between Anakin Skywalker and Mace Windu is a fight I always wanted to see. It would have made for a more compelling fight than Mace vs. Sidious. The closest I ever came to seeing this was in the Revenge of the Sith video game back in 2005. Anakin and Mace were always at odds. The tension between the two was at its peak during episode 3. I mean, just look at the scene.
Take a seat, young Skywalker.
Look at that face. Anakin wants nothing more than to f Windu up. It would be a great fight to behold. Much like the video game adaptation, it would definitely be a marathon fight. The victor would only be decided by inches. They were both tenacious fighters, never shying away from brutality when the situation called for it. Let's set up this fight. In fact, let's play out a what-if scenario. Let's say it takes place in Palpatine's office. The Jedi come to arrest Palpatine, but this time, as was intended in the original script, Anakin is there by his side. Like the movie, Sidious would make short work of the Jedi, but instead of continuing his attack against Windu, he orders Anakin to do it himself. As a side note, this will be an examination of Windu without the amp he achieved in the novelization. Let's also say that Sidious does not intervene, wanting to truly test Anakin's strength. As a final tally, I would say the advantage to the victor goes 6-10. And I really can't stress enough how close this verdict is. It's really almost a 5 out of 10 split decision, but one of these combatants has a slight edge. The following is a hypothetical battle of one majority victory. Anakin would, of course, be the first to attack. Much like his fight with Count Dooku, he would be aggressive, but his determination would be much more controlled. His desire to fight would not come from an eagerness to show off, but a tempered aggression, a confidence that was unfaltering. Much like his original fight with Sidious, Mace would drop back in a defensive posture, fending off Anakin's assault. With a calculated block, Windu would counter with a swift punch to Anakin's gut, or a roundhouse to Anakin's thigh. Anakin will likely buckle, not so much that he will be open to Windu's blade, but enough to put him on his back foot. The tables would turn. Now Windu will be on the offensive, letting the joy of battle envelop his strikes and cleaves. Mace would attack with his signature Vapad style, leaving Anakin unbalanced with his offbeat rhythm, switching from blinding fast strikes to precise stabs in an instant. As Sam Jackson would say of Mace, his style was less about feints and twirls, it was more about minimalist movements, dispatching his foes as quickly as possible. But Mace Windu would be facing the greatest Jimso master of his time. Each of Windu's strikes would be met with a riposte from Anakin. Each of Anakin's crosscuts would send shockwaves through Windu's arms. Windu's Vapad would be effective, utilizing the thrill of battle to his benefit, but Anakin's own connection to the Force, his inherent reflex and skill, would kick in, fueling his own counterattack. After a short sequence of strike and riposte from Mace and Anakin, there will be a break in the combat. Anakin would counter with an overhead cleave, searing the edges of Windu's robes. Mace will become unbalanced for a moment, attempting to evade the blow. Anakin would land a kick to Windu's gut. The Jedi Master would fly back into a wall, nearly breaking his back, but he would continue fighting through his pain, throwing out a force push of his own. The telekinetic blast would land, throwing Anakin across the far end of the room. For a moment, the two combatants would gather their breath, eyeing each other with respect and contempt. And then, in a flash, they would go at it again. Lightsabers would clash, noses would be kicked in, force blows would be traded. Mace would use his Shatterpoint to decipher Anakin's breaking point, but Anakin would match him with his reflex and precognition. The match would rage on, a marathon fight that would play out over several minutes. But neither could keep up their efforts indefinitely. Eventually, someone was going to give, and it would likely be Windu who would edge out, feeding on Anakin's mounting aggression, bolstering his power through his own. Yet this matchup would not likely end by way of the blade. Instead, it would be Mace Windu's slight advantage in his use of the Force that would turn the tides to his favor. It would not come in an instant. It would not be an extraordinary show of force, not some powerful force push or force crush. It would come in the little things, the nagging use of chairs and lampstands, the force pushes to the ankles, knees, and joints. It would not happen in a second. it would happen over the course of hard-earned minutes. But eventually, Mace would find his opening, disarming Anakin of his blade, or finding a tactical advantage on the battlefield, or simply fighting smarter, not harder. And considering Windu's no bullshit attitude, the fight would likely end in Anakin's death. And thus, I declare Mace Windu, the Master of the Order, the badass of lightsaber combat, the battered, bruised, and broken victor. Of course, this is all my opinion, based on my interpretation of the movies, books, and interview material. I am aware that if this battle did happen in the context of the movie, Anakin would likely be the victor due to plot and self-fulfilling prophecies. But in the context of the greater lore, it makes more sense for me that Mace would be the victor in a very, very slight majority, given what we know of him from the Star Wars mythos. But of course, I want to hear your opinions. Do you think Anakin could have won a majority? Or do you agree that Windu would be the most likely victor between the two? In any case, peace, love, and may the Force be with you. Always.
This was the dark side of the Force. It was pure, and it was powerful. Unlimited.
No, why are you mowing your lawn right now? I'm recording a Let's Play.